At 5:03.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public forum. Would anyone like to speak about something that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, move on. Approval of meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? All right. Chairman's report. I did want to say something regarding the school assessment issue that's kind of been publicized. It's going to be a little redundant. I said it at our last selectmen's meeting. But basically, the job of the Budget Override Evaluation Committee was to conduct a comprehensive overview of the town's capabilities to maintain services, address deficiencies, and funding issues. Looking at all those things to see if we can do that within the levy, or would we have to go outside of the levy. An issue with the schools, how the school assessment came up, several different venues by several people in various courses of time. I think as a committee, we saw some merit in that. I know I saw merit in that. We sent it to the school district to have it evaluated, and that's where we sit right now. We have no answers. We don't know when, if, and how this is going to be implemented. But I do want to address that on social media, we've been accused of picking Hanson's pocket. I would say that is the furthest thing from the truth. This is this committee looking at an issue to protect the taxpayers of Whitman, our kids, and our interests that we wanted an answer to, plain and simple. Preliminary reports and opinions say we may be on the right track with that. We will see hopefully Wednesday night, the school committee. We will have attorneys from Hanson, the school committee, hopefully somebody from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and Whitman will provide information. We will see where it goes from there. Beyond that, any accusations of any improprieties, nefarious and malicious conduct is very premature at this time. I'd like that avoided. Beyond that, we've presented the issue. It's really not going to be an issue for our committee until we get an answer again. Until we get a definitive answer how this will affect the town, then we will address it. But again, this is not picking pockets of the town of Hanson. This is addressing an issue that came up, thought we had merit, and wanted it evaluated, plain and simple. I think that's what the taxpayers of Whitman would expect from their appointed and elected leaders. And that's where we stand with that. Beyond that, I don't see this committee taking it up until we have a definitive answer, like I said. All right, moving on. This evening we were supposed to have Mr. John Madden, who the town has contracted to help us provide another set of eyes and an evaluation. Unfortunately, Mr. Madden had a family emergency and a personal emergency and cannot be here, but I know Mr. Lambiase had spoken with him.
Yeah, I was in contact with him. I talked with him today and at one point last week, and he just sort of gave me an update that he's pretty well into his report. He's finished his sort of the 5-year look back, and he's well into projections going ahead. I know that he's been working with Frank, and he's met with Frank several times. He's going to reach out either later this week, depending on what's going on with his issues, and either later this week or early next week to some certain department heads and to the school superintendent. So we look forward to getting a report. I did ask him to try and let me know of his availability either next Monday or the following Monday to regroup with this committee. We do want to meet with him prior to our October joint meeting. So I did let him know about that, and he was going to get back to me as soon as possible. And I don't know, Frank, I don't know if you have anything to add. I know, like I said, he did think that things were going pretty well as far as getting information and getting things together.
He did pretty much complete the 5-year. There's a few lingering items that he's waiting on Ken for, but we're not waiting for, but has asked Ken to give him last Thursday afternoon. He is noting that there's certain consistencies and that some of the issues may be how much funds we're committing to various segments of local government. And that's going to be part of that analysis. Are we doing more? Are we doing less? Should we be doing more? And that's all going to come and play into what our function here is. So I'm disappointed that he couldn't be here today. He didn't have an opportunity to put together a brief summary, but he will be working on it later in the week, I believe.
And I still am very confident we have made a very solid decision with him. It is unfortunate, and it's his personal issues, but I will say it's very excusable. One of the things, I'm just going to skip out of order on the agenda real quick, was that we were going to have a discussion about levy analysis, which Mr. Galvin brought up. The discussion definitely needs to take place. I personally would like to have it with Mr. Madden here. I think he'll be able to offer some insight on that. And Mr. Galvin's permission, I would take a motion to pass that over this evening.
So moved.
Second.
I agree with that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next up, Dave Cordero, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, just to let us know where the Finance Committee sits.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, the Finance Committee, we began our budget season like we do each year by requesting department heads to forward copies of their upcoming fiscal draft budget. And we request them to prepare to meet up with us at least one time so we can make informed recommendations to the townspeople during next town meeting. As of our last meeting, it's my understanding that we received only one response, and that was from Ollie Amato of the Recreation Department. As far as I can tell, he responded that he had no intention of meeting with us. And let me just finish. And we're hoping that the Recreation Commissioners will persuade him otherwise. Go ahead, Frank.
That issue has been addressed. He will be meeting with the Finance Committee.
Great, that's great news. With the exception of the school committees, letter of interest to the Board of Selectmen regarding forwarding a new middle school feasibility study sometime in the future, and the need for a significant sewer water project. We're not aware of any large funding or large capital purchases or improvements from any other departments at this time. And that is it.
All right.
Just to follow up on that, did I see that the capital committee is meeting soon, Frank? Is that getting?
I want to meet in advance of receiving that report from Collins because I want to reorganize the committee.
Right.
And be prepared to attend that meeting on the...
Are there still
the 10th?
vacancies on that committee?
Yes.
I believe there will be. That's one of the reasons I'm meeting, to determine where we are.
Okay.
All right.
You volunteering?
This evening, we received a copy of the Whitman Member Town Financial Report that the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District went to the Mars Consulting Group to develop. Unfortunately, Mr. Simonak, Superintendent Simonak, could not be here this evening. This is something I will put back on after we've all had a chance to kind of digest it a little bit. And I will make sure this is on for our next meeting date.
As I mentioned before we got started, I saw it on the school committee agenda as well for Wednesday. So I'm assuming they were going to have a discussion on it as well. So if those watching live may want to watch that live or attend that meeting, I know there's a public hearing on that as well. Obviously, that's going to be, I believe, at least a well-attended meeting. But I'm pretty sure we'll get some analysis on this from that meeting as well. For both towns, actually, Whitman and Hanson.
Yeah, I think looking at it briefly, I've only had it a couple days now. There's some solid information in here. Again, it's another piece to the puzzle. Budget discussion. Just before I go to Frank, I will say our next meeting date, I really think we need this progress report from Mr. Madden. We will have this, and I do want Jeff here to explain his thoughts and his take on it. Beyond that, we don't know when Mr. Madden will be here, so we could possibly have to do a quick meeting, or we may have to push it out, but I definitely would want to get it scheduled before the Collins group. I want to have that baseline before we introduce a whole capital portion to this. Nobody had any concerns with that.
Makes sense.
As far as the budget, Frank, have we, where do we sit with actually seeing department budgets?
Well, we did the first pass, that 5-year exercise, and the Finance Committee has that. The request for current budget, and this is where we're going to have some, maybe a little bit of confusion and maybe a little more protesting, but they'll get over it, is that we've asked people to do things that are decidedly different. One is a projection out 5 years. One is, what are we doing in fiscal '21? I've already had a few comments about that, and my answer is the same as it's always been. We do a budget every year, prepare it, do your best to anticipate what you think you need, document those things that you're adding to the budget line so that a case can be made for it. And then ultimately, the budgets will be analyzed in total and decisions will be made. You know, we've never told anyone not to submit a request, but I encourage them to think about the impact of those requests and how they fit with all of the other budgets, because ultimately our budget will reflect what we have to work with. And right now, we don't know whether we're working with 2.5% over last year or a greater levy. So part of that need will be identified with these new budgets.
Yeah, a big part of the need will. And hopefully that gets resolved. I know at the last school committee meeting, both Hanson and Whitman members were hoping to resolve this quickly so that it does not, so that we can move forward in the budgeting process either way.
Well, we've seen nothing from the schools with respect to a budget. The only informal comment I got was about a month ago when the superintendent said that you could figure on about a 4% increase, which is on the total budget, not on our share. And if everything remains as it is today, that's another 11 or 12%.
Well, I know there were, in 2 school committee meetings ago, they talked about 2 items in which they wanted to pursue, and one of them was all-day kindergarten, which I know is a hot topic. And then another one was adjusting the start times of the schools so that it would start later, which would affect the amount of the busing expense.
Has a big impact.
It was a big impact. It was about $400,000, but only in 1 year, I think. And the all-day kindergarten was like $700,000, something like that, if I recall.
I did have a conversation with a school committee member, And I did tried to make my point well known, that yes, we do have an assessment issue going on, but as far as what the school, what their needs will be, this committee, to properly address those needs, are going to need to know them well in advance of what they usually have provided us. And I was pretty clear that it couldn't be in April, that to address needs, we need to know what those needs are. And beyond that, it's now up to the school committee. But this board cannot proceed with only a town portion. You know, what we have for numbers from the town, and trying to make asking taxpayers based on a guesstimate of what they might ask for. And so, Mr. Simonak has been extremely cooperative to this point. I would expect nothing less, but we are also asking him to do something that they typically don't do until April. And their numbers aren't finalized either. I mean, none of this is these numbers, there are a lot of, I hate the word guesstimate, but pretty much what it is, but we know it's guesstimates based on trends. So I don't see any reason why they could not provide us with something a lot sooner, so we can. I would hate to make determinations and then have that change in April, if we're still shooting for a decision probably by December, I think we had said.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe the budget for the region is supposed to be produced in January, and we have asked them to step up. And it is a huge undertaking for them to go department by department and line by line, but there's so much at stake here that we really have to come together on this and have a common understanding of what we're looking for and how to get there.
If I recall in that meeting, I mentioned school committees ago, when they were talking about those two line items. It was in a update in which they were talking, Jeff was updating this committee's progress to the school committee. And at that point, I believe George said that they pretty much had run preliminary numbers for 2021 for the school, because they're, because of our request. So hopefully they can get that to us sooner than later.
And the numbers will be the numbers ultimately, but it's the numbers beyond what they feel confident they can properly add, what they're going to try and add.
Well, the $1.3 million for those two line items alone, above and beyond their regular budget. I can understand the all-day school, the all-day kindergarten is going to get a hard push this year, I think, and it's really something we need to kind of look at with them. Personally, the school bus, the adjusting the time, I'm not quite sure this is the time for that, but we'll have to see what they come up with, I guess.
I just don't want, this board is going to ultimately, it's not our position, at least in my opinion, to be telling a department what we think they should be adding. This is why I want the school committee to do it. We're ultimately going to have to provide a number, and
Or not.
or not, right? Or not. And we're going to have to base it on some things. But I think if we, and this is how I see it going, if we think we're going to, if ultimately we would need an override, a discussion of how much that override should be, and then we would go back to the various departments, ask them to cut their own items down if that was the case. I don't want this board to get into what we think each department, because I think we have a finance committee that has a very in-depth look at each department. And from the beginning, I'd said we would probably be working multifaceted with all different levels of government, town government. So I think we need to be very careful with doing that. I could say that my personal take is we need more STEM and we need to bring back languages, but that's my opinion. And that we need to try and avoid.
And I brought this up at the first meeting, but I think it'd be appropriate when you're having this kind of discussion to also include the idea of a strategic plan. A strategic plan would give some guidance to priorities, coming from, the Board of Selectmen. And maybe the idea was that the strategic plan, or this would all go towards like a strategic plan, but it seems like it has to be some give and take because...
I think, personally, I think you're going to see it develop at one time. One, how can we develop the strategic plan if we really don't know what money we're going to ask for at this point? But I think what we realize is our deficiencies where we can do things better. What I have seen from the early Collins report information that's come out, is giving us a very good roadmap of where we're going to need to invest some different money. And that's, I would say, as part of that building was different than what I thought we would need to do. How much actually more needs to be invested. So if I was to put together my own strategic plan early on, I don't think I would have taken some of those things into consideration. I think the information we're gathering, Sean, and I know I've said this before, I think you may not be 100% happy with it, but I think ultimately when this process ends, the rough map is there. I think it's very tough to develop the strategic plan somewhat based off the blank canvas right now. And there's a lot of variables. I think Scott would tell you there's a lot of things up in the air right now that...
Yeah, we discussed it. I mean, there is quite a few things that have to settle down, but I don't believe that it's the task of this committee to put together a strategic plan. I think one absolutely has to be done, but the things that need to settle first to put that strategic plan is the recommendations of this committee, the flushing out of what's going on with the Collins report, and the flushing out of what's going on with the schools and how it's funded. And then another group, it is in this group, has to take all of that and put together a long-term strategic plan. But all those balls in the air have to settle first. And I think we're on a good path. We are getting there. I think we're moving forward in a lot better clip than we ever have. So all of the information that we're getting from all of these different issues, the Mars report, Collins report, the ultimate report from this committee, will be a great foundation for it. But it is in this group that should be doing it.
And it could be, I think it could be this group, and I'd like to see that after. I mean, maybe we transition to that, considering we've been in the process, and we go there after. And right now, we're looking at an override, and maybe, yes.
Stop that.
Well, we're evaluating an override. And again, I may have added something just based off being a selectman, how I would hope the information went down. Maybe I wasn't clear that, yeah, it's probably not this committee that's gonna build our strategic plan. I'm leaving 4 other guys out that probably have a little bit of a say in that. So I think it'll come. But I am gonna say, I know what you're saying. Please don't think it's falling on deaf. I think you're saying you're going to tell me where you're going to go, but you don't know where you're going, right?
Well, I guess if the major goal of this committee is to determine whether or not we're sustainable based on the status quo, that seems to make sense. But I remember, like the superintendent was saying, I think like the all-day kindergarten, or if we're going to ask for an override, should we add some components? I think it's to add some components without a strategic plan that kind of feels weird to me. Like if it's just the sustainability, then to me, that makes sense, but if it is
That's all we
the
can look
DPW is
at.
gonna ask for this, and the fire department's gonna ask for something that's really needed, but over and above the status quo, it feels like there should be a strategic plan attached.
I would say that I see the school as being the big additions, and that's something that I don't think this committee, that's why we have a school committee. They need to tell us what you want it, ultimately. They're the people who do it every day. I'm not gonna overstep bounds. The DPW, I think you will see a lot of their issues get addressed through the Collins report, what I've already seen. We have made our major addition to the fire department. I don't see any major changes to any department. Any major, yes, the police department, I would say there is a strong argument that we don't leave 350 shifts unfilled. But as far as a major, I don't see us adding manpower there, or that's never been discussed. I think this town has a lot of capital needs that really are hanging over us that you will see are going to be the big issues. Barring Tim asking for more people.
Not me.
You know, we've addressed a lot of things. Not being, I understand what you're saying. I don't.
I think it goes back to what we discussed at, I think, our first meeting is we asked the department heads to look around and do a comparison to where we currently are and to where we think we should be, or what we don't have that other towns have that would make this a better online community, and see where that falls within the budget process. And I agree with you that you know, those aren't big ticket items. Full day kindergarten is, but at the end of the day, it's something that we have to do because I believe it's statutory, or it's going to be statutory. So
Hasn't been passed yet, but it's gonna
get passed, yeah.
getting pushed hard.
Right. So I mean, at the end of the day, this committee, and I applaud like the finance committee for like having our budgets in so early, so we can work with that. And we have new leadership at the school district, and they're very forthcoming and they're very progressive. And I have faith that they're gonna step up and do what needs to be done to present their preliminary budgets as to what they're looking at for fiscal 21. So this on my committee can sit probably with the finance committee or whatever and say, okay, I'll use me for an example, you know, like fire wanted X and the FinCom is only recommending this, you know, and police is DPW. So that puts us at this number, and this doesn't require an override. But if we do this, what do they have and what don't we have list, then it does require one for, you know, who knows, $500,000 or $1 million, something like that.
Right.
What are we going to do at that point to say, where do we want to go?
Right, and I think something that, when you ask people to do a 2.5 override, I don't think it can be for wish list items.
Right.
I think it has to be to meet glaring deficiencies, glaring shortages. Other than that, you need to save and build for those things. Now, like I just said, I personally have my own opinion of where we have some shortages in every department. I don't know if they're all going to be addressed this year. I don't know how we would do it at this point.
Right. I don't think anybody knows because we don't know where our numbers are.
Right.
Because part of that process is going to involve strategic approach, which argues the plan that, you know, what do we need now? What do we need a year from now? How long can we go before we achieve this level? We did a survey. The survey did provide some interesting information about what people think about the town and what our needs are, we have to incorporate those into a plan that identifies where the strategic plan is, where are we going to be 5 years from now? What do we want to see? What do we want to be? And that comes into play with it. You know, do we want schools that make us an attractive community to the people around us? Do we want upgraded facilities? Do we want more? Trying to think of the words. More to offer to the citizens at large for the town? Do we have programs that embrace and invite people? All of that comes into play, and I'm sure we all have heard the expression, it's not going to happen overnight, but we're moving toward it, and our function here right now is to identify where we think those numbers are and where our financial needs are. And that will play into this process, because a plan could redefine that.
Right.
I mean, we know there are certain things we need. One of them is we know we have a sewer issue and we need that.
Right.
Doesn't matter how we plan. We need that. And those are the things we have to look at. And, you know, for a number of people, the all-day kindergarten has been something we've talked about ad nauseum. It's time to make a decision.
I mean, what I will say with that is, anyone who's following this, there is a bill out right now that I think if passed mandates it by 2023. 23?
I think it's 23.
I
think it's 23.
It hasn't been voted on yet, though.
No, it hasn't been voted on. It's been drafted.
Right,
And
yeah.
it does have a date that, if passed, will be mandated, and I believe it's 2023. That is not something you want to be behind the curve on.
Right.
I mean, that, if we were behind the curve on that, what's going to happen is they will start that program, and budget used for other programs gets diverted to it if the town hadn't figured out a way to fund it. That being said, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to see where, could we fund it right now? I don't know.
We don't know.
We haven't seen the numbers. We will. I asked people for a little bit more patience. I will say tonight, with the consultant not being here, it has set us back. I thought we were making good progress. This slowed us down, but we are going to keep moving. Like I said, I'm very confident with the person we chose. This definitely is an extremely excusable absence. That's all I'm going to get into. And we're going to move ahead. A lot of moving parts. The school, we're going to get their numbers, and they need to take a conscious effort, a conscious look that everything might not be able to be added this year. Maybe it is. Maybe there is an approach of how we do that. But we're gonna, when we get all the budgets, we figure out the asks, and we'll go from there. But as far as figuring out where the money's going, I think we have a very good handle on that, and that will come to light very shortly. The assessment issue with the school, again, Wednesday night, hopefully some clarity. I don't know if we will have an answer, but hopefully some clarity. And we will go from there. Beyond that.
Can I say? Yeah.
Yeah.
So just this recent discussion, it's making it sound that our timeline seems to be expedited. But I just want to remind everyone that, you know, at the beginning of our meetings, we discussed that our timeline isn't this fall. It'd be great if we had something this fall. But, you know, we're doing things expediently, but we're in no rush to get things done. I guess what I'm trying to say. It's just that this conversation that was going made it sound like we were behind the eight ball, and we're not there yet.
No, we're definitely not behind the eight ball. But I don't want to stall either. The timeline, I think we discussed, you know, we realized October wasn't going to happen. But progress should, I think as long as we're always progressing towards the end goal, if that is an override, the date we put that on will be when we finish. But I'm not going to stall and get to May and not have answers. I mean, in my own mind, I think we had said this, we should have answers by the first of the year, where we're going. Beyond that, other parts of this take over. And just because we've identified possibly how much money we're going to ask for, well, those are the numbers. You know, we can always add based on if we're going to add to the strategic plan, take away, reshuffle some things. But I think the puzzle will fall into place, Sean.
I agree with what Dave's saying, but part of me thinks, like, has the selectmen, do you know of any initiative right now to contact like a consultant to start to build a strategic plan? Is that in the works at all? Like, are people actively making progress on that?
I would not even recommend, I would recommend that. I would not recommend it now. Not until we have a very clear budget picture. Like, we can get a clear picture. We don't need to ask or say no to the override, but we're getting this all together.
Sure.
I would have no problem doing that, but I think you need to provide a clear financial picture to that company. And I think that would have, a strategic plan beyond that would fall into place. I would have zero problem recommending something like that. And it may be the logical next step. You know, we've had the financial consultant, we've had the Collins Center come in, capital. That could be the next step. I would have zero problem with that, but I think we need a financial picture painted right now. Because next year's coming quick, Sean. You know, it does come quick. I don't want to be in May cutting people, cutting budgets. So
We've been using that towards Beth Greenblatt.
it's important. I've always agreed with you,
I
Randy.
just looked at it today.
Like I said, that probably is the next logical step. I don't know who in the town
We could use for a consultant.
would be, I think we probably would have to go to a consulting firm to develop
I would say so.
a full strategic plan. And like I said, I can't make that decision for the board, but I would have no problem recommending that. But I just ask you to bear with me a little bit longer. All right. Next meeting date.
Do we need to wait to get more information from Mr. Madden?
Can we do a tentative?
I think it's very important he's here for our next meeting. And I definitely want to do it try to get it in before the Collins Center.
I'll shoot for next Monday, and if we have to cancel, we
And
cancel.
it's really you only really have 2 Mondays options, either next Monday or the Monday after that.
I'd say that if we're gonna look at something, let's look at the 30th.
Yeah, I agree. I think that gives,
I don't think you'll be ready for next Monday.
Yeah. So the 30th.
Yeah. Would that work for everyone, 30th?
And having said that, I did talk to him today that he's working on some numbers. We're gonna be collaborating at the end of the week to at least start formatting a report, so.
I mean, it is pretty impressive what he's dealing with and how much he's actually still been able to get accomplished. So I give the man a lot of credit. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
15 minutes.
What?
15 minutes.
There you go.